Alright, what's up guys? Look, today I'm going to be talking about a game that I used to play called Anarchy Online. Now, I don't have long to talk. It's a very short video, so I'm going to be sort of breezing through it quite quickly. This is the precursor to my next How I Made Money as a Student, so I highly suggest that you pay attention. That way you can sort of know a little bit about the context of the next video. Okay, so real simple. Anarchy Online is a massively multiplayer online RPG game. Or MMORPG for short, for those of you who don't know. It's a game that's very similar to World of Warcraft, except it came out much earlier than World of Warcraft. And the game came out in early 2001, I believe. And it's a game that I picked up shortly after I broke off with my girlfriend, actually. I was looking for like something to do, you know, you're in grief and whatever, so you always look for other stuff to think about, and this game just happened to sort of fall into my lap. What happened was a friend of mine had told me that he'd been playing it. Actually, a friend of mine had told me that another friend of his had been playing it and that he would introduce it to me, and so he did. And I was really intrigued. You got to remember, guys, this is 2000, and actually this was in 2002. That was when I started playing it. So it had been out for about 8 months before I started playing it. So it's relatively new. At that time, only a few other MMO, I think only like one or two other MMORPGs actually existed. It was a very, very new genre. The internet wasn't really all that old either. It was quite new. So, you know, everyone was still using dial-up connections, and there was no like broadband and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, we're talking like old. It's old. You know, the graphics are like, were decent. At the time, they were really, really good. But what really sort of set this MMORPG apart from the others was that this wasn't a fantasy setting. This is a sci-fi setting. The game's set in the future, and it had a huge backstory to it. You know, if you really want to know all the details about the game, you can go on Wikipedia and search it up. But basically, it was a sci-fi game that was set in the future, and it had like an animated series even that was sort of running concurrently alongside the game to sort of promote the story and push the story forward. And what would happen is, as things happened in the series, you saw that reflected in the game. So it was really persistent. It was like happening right before your eyes, and a lot of the time, the stuff that people did in the game actually was reflected in the comic or in the series, sorry, and vice versa. So it was really cool. You felt like you had an influence on the stuff that was happening in the game at the time. And you got to remember, this was all happening when PlayStation 2 was new. You know, Nintendo 64 was on its way out. Majora's Mask had sort of only just been released when this game got released, so it's an old game, you know. But at that time, it was revolutionary. It was the first game that I ever played that was online, and entirely online. And you know, you saw other people in the game, and they moved around, and they were real people. They weren't controlled by computers and stuff. They were actual players in the game, like moving around, and you could talk to them, and you know, you could ask them questions, and they were from like across the world and stuff. So it was awesome. It was brand new. It was like really, really excellent, like an awesome game. Anyway, that game is actually responsible for my disinterest in a lot of current games that just aren't online. Like, since I played that game, basically my interest in offline games just nosedived. Like, I just didn't care anymore, because where do you go from after you start playing online games, interactive online games with real people, and that kind of stuff? You know, offline games where you're just interacting with the computer suddenly seems so mundane and so boring. So that game was responsible for that, and it took me a long time to be able to sort of get over it and get back and appreciate offline games for what they were. But anyway, so we had this Anarchy Online game, and it's 2002 at the time, and I started playing it, and it was awesome. And I pretty much maxed out the game. I actually ended up playing. I got my brother into it, and he loved it. And we together became some of the most influential players in the game. Like, people, pretty much everyone knew our names by the end of it. And well, yeah, everyone, not pretty much, everyone did know our names by the end of it. We became almost the leading authority on particular classes in the game, and people would basically come to us to ask us. But more specifically my brother, because he was sort of, toward the end, he really got into the game more so than I did. And they came to us to ask us about like how they should set up their characters, and what's the best armor, and what's the best weapons, and what's the best this, and what's the best that. We literally became like well known throughout the whole community of the game. And we played the game for pretty much, well, it's almost, I'm almost ashamed to say it, I really am. But it's with these online games, they're designed to be so addictive that once you start sort of playing one and you sort of start getting absorbed into one, especially if you become like almost a celebrity in the game as well, you don't want to give it up, and you become so invested in the game, and you've put so much time and effort into it that you really don't want to let it all go and move on to another game. So what happened was I sort of, for about, again, I don't want to, I feel so ashamed to say it, but for about 8 years, 7 or 8 years, I pretty much played that game exclusively, because, like I said, I was so invested in it, and that's pretty much all I wanted to do and all I wanted to play. I actually took 1 year off after high school, and I spent that entire year basically playing the game. That's how pathetic it was. And, you know, I completely regret all of this, and I do not recommend anyone do that ever in their lifetime, because it was just the worst decision I've made in my life. But yeah, that's how invested I was in this game, and I only stopped playing it probably in 2009. So it wasn't, you know, like I said, seven years or so. It was a really long time. But anyway, that's Anarchy Online. Now you guys know about it, and the next episode of How I Made Money as a Student will carry on from this one and talk about how I made money using Anarchy Online.